The fare request came in at 11:47 p.m. Daniel Hayes accepted it without thinking. He'd learned not to think too much about the fares, which neighborhoods, which hours, which names on the app. Thinking too much cost you time. Time cost you money. And money, right now, was the only thing standing between him and a second notice from the hospital billing office. He checked the rearview mirror. Lily was asleep in the back seat, tucked under the gray flannel blanket he kept folded on the headrest. Her mouth was slightly open. One sneaker had fallen off. She was 6 years old and she slept the way only children sleep, completely, without reservation. As if the world had promised in writing to leave her alone until morning. He reached back and pulled the blanket up to her chin without taking his eyes off the road. The pickup address was 12 minutes north, near the edge of the city where the commercial strips gave way to industrial flatlands, and the streetlights started spacing themselves farther apart. Not unusual, not ideal. He pulled onto the highway ramp and let the engine settle into the low, steady hum that he found, after 3 years of night driving, genuinely calming. The app showed a name, Rachel M. No rating visible. New account. Daniel noticed. He always noticed. But he drove anyway. He'd been driving for Crestline Rides for 2 years and 4 months. Before that, he'd spent 7 years doing something he didn't talk about anymore, something that required clearances, a government-issued laptop, and the ability to disappear for weeks at a time without leaving a traceable footprint. He'd been good at it. He'd been, by certain quiet metrics, exceptional. Then Claire got sick. And then Claire died. And then there was Lily. And no clearance in the world told him what to do with a 3-year-old who still asked, twice a week, when Mama was coming home. So he drove. Night shifts when his neighbor, Mrs. Calloway, was available to sit. Sometimes he brought Lily along she'd long since stopped minding. Had come to treat the back seat of the Honda as a second bedroom, complete with her blanket, her stuffed rabbit, and the small LED reading light he'd clipped to the headrest so she could look at picture books before she fell asleep. Tonight, the rabbit was tucked under her arm. The blanket smelled like fabric softener. Daniel kept his eyes forward. He was not, by nature, a complicated man anymore. He liked coffee without sugar. He liked the hour before Lily woke up, when the apartment was quiet and he could stand at the kitchen window and watch the sky do its slow thing. He liked the specific weight of her when she fell asleep against his shoulder on the couch. He did not like surprises. He did not like, particularly, the way the pickup address was resolving itself on the map. Not a corner, not an intersection, but a stretch of shoulder along Route 9, between exits, with no visible structure nearby. He pulled off the highway anyway. She was standing in the middle of the shoulder, not to the side of it. That was the first thing he noticed. Most people who needed a ride stood back from the road, near the guardrail or a signpost. This woman was standing in the lane, not quite, but close enough that his headlights hit her full on before he'd expected it, and he had to brake a half-second harder than he liked. She was white, mid-30s, and she was wearing a wool coat that had clearly been through something. The left shoulder seam was torn. Her hair was dark, and it was loose, and there were strands of it across her face that she wasn't bothering to push away. She was not looking at him. She was looking behind her. Daniel held the wheel and did not immediately unlock the door. He watched her for 3 seconds, long enough to count. She wasn't swaying. She wasn't weeping. She was alert, controlled, and frightened in the way that people who have been trained to manage frightened look. The stillness too deliberate, the breathing too measured, the eyes moving in a pattern that wasn't random. He had, once, been exactly that kind of frightened. In the back seat, Lily stirred. "Beau?" Her voice was small, blurred with sleep. "I see her," Daniel said. "Go back to sleep." Lily sat up instead. She looked out the window, at the woman in the headlights. "Is she okay?" Lily asked. "I'm going to find out." He rolled down the passenger window. "You call for a ride?" The woman turned. She looked at him, then at the back seat at Lily, small and blanket-wrapped and blinking. And something in her expression shifted. Not relief exactly, something more complicated, something that looked almost like regret. "Yes," she said, "I did. Get in." She hesitated for one more second, Then she opened the door and got in. Her name, she said, was Eva Carter. She said it the way someone says a name they've been practicing just slightly too smooth, the syllables landing without the small hesitation that comes when a name is genuinely yours, and you're genuinely in the middle of something frightening. Daniel said nothing. She gave an address, a hotel on the east side of downtown, the kind with a parking garage and a rotating door, and minimal questions at the front desk. He entered it into the navigation. He pulled back onto the highway. She did not look at her phone. She did not take it out. He noticed that too. For the first 3 minutes she sat with her hands in her lap, fingers interlaced, and watched the road. Then she looked in the side mirror. Then she looked in the rearview mirror. Which meant she was looking at him and at Lily simultaneously. And she caught him watching her do it. "You don't have a phone," Daniel said. "Not a question." "I lost it," she said. Lily, who had decided not to go back to sleep, was watching Eva with the focused, unsentimental attention that children give to things they haven't categorized yet. "Your coat is ripped," Lily said. Eva looked down at her shoulder. "I know. Did you fall?" "Something like that." "Does it hurt?" Eva looked at the little girl in the back seat and seemed, for a moment, to be genuinely surprised by the question. "A little," she said. "Not too bad. My dad fell off a ladder once," Lily offered. "He said a bad word." Daniel said, "Lily, he did. That was a private incident." Lily considered this. What does incident mean? Go back to sleep. She didn't, but she stopped asking questions. She pulled the blanket up to her nose and watched Eva with her big, quiet eyes. And Daniel watched the road, and Eva watched the mirror, and for approximately 4 minutes, the night was cold and still, and the highway was empty in both directions. Then the lights appeared. They were far back, far enough that a normal driver wouldn't register them as anything other than regular traffic. Distant high beams, trucks maybe. The ordinary furniture of a late highway, but they were spaced wrong. Daniel saw it the same second Eva turned in her seat. 3 sets of lights, not 2. Arranged in a line that was slightly too neat. Spaced in a way that suggested coordination rather than coincidence. Moving at a speed that was not highway normal, it was highway plus, the kind of speed that eats distance without appearing to hurry. "They found me," Eva said. Her voice had dropped. All the practiced smoothness was gone. "Who are they?" She didn't answer immediately. "Eva. People I used to work for," Lily said, quietly, from under her blanket. "They're not turning. They're just following." Daniel checked the mirror again. She was right. Most cars, when they catch up to a vehicle ahead, will slightly drift toward the passing lane. Signal. Adjust. These 3 had not changed their lateral position by a single inch. They were locked onto the same line he was driving. That was not normal behavior. That was targeting behavior. He held the wheel and did not change his speed. "Not yet. Is there anything in that coat that belongs to them?" he said. Ava's hand went involuntarily to her left side. There was something there. The flat outline of something under the wool, against her ribs. "A drive," she said. "A storage drive." "What's on it?" She looked at him sideways. "You sure you want to know? We're doing 100 kilometers an hour with 3 black vehicles pacing us from behind. My daughter is in the back seat. And you just confirmed you have whatever they're looking for pressed against your body." "Yes, I want to know." "A long beat. Financial data," Eva said. "Transaction records. 17 months of them. Movement between domestic accounts and offshore structures that aren't supposed to exist. Payments to people who aren't supposed to be paid. Through shell entities connected to a company called Meridian Capital Group. Corporate fraud, among other things." She paused. "The other things are the part they really want back." The lights behind them were closer now. Daniel said, "Lily, lie down on the seat and keep the blanket over you." "Why?" "Because I said so." She lay down. He heard the small, definitive sound of her pulling the flannel over her head. He pressed the accelerator. The first SUV came up the left side so fast that Daniel barely had time to register it before it was even with his door. a black Chevy Suburban, the plate obscured, the windows tinted to the legal maximum, and then some. It paced him for exactly 4 seconds. Then it cut right. The Honda's tires screamed. Daniel corrected, already moving hands doing what hands do when the muscle memory is deep enough that thought is not required. He pulled right, lost 2 feet of lane, found the shoulder, felt the gravel under the right tires before he steered back onto asphalt. "Hold on," he said. Eva was gripping the door handle. The second SUV was ahead now. He hadn't seen it get there. It had passed while he was managing the cut. And now, it was 30 meters in front of him. Brake lights glowing red, decelerating. Behind him, the third vehicle was closing. To his left, the first was repositioning. Box formation. He recognized it. He'd seen it used, had used it. Once. In a context he didn't want to think about right now. He had perhaps 8 seconds before the box was complete. He took the next exit without signaling. The ramp was tight. He took it at a speed that was not designed for the ramp. And the Honda protested in every panel and strut. And Eva made a sound that wasn't quite a word, and from under the blanket in the back seat, there was silence, which was Lily's way of being afraid. At the bottom of the ramp, a stop sign, a dark intersection, 2 directions. He went left, industrial zone, warehouses, parking lots ringed with chain link, the kind of area that was busy at 6 a.m. and empty at midnight. Midnight was approximately what it was. In the rear view, 1 set of lights, then 2, then 3, coming down the ramp behind him. They had not lost them. He'd bought 30 seconds. He pulled into the lot of a shuttered distribution facility and cut the engine and the lights. "Don't move," he said. They didn't. In the dark, in the cold, with the engine ticking as it cooled, Daniel Hayes sat very still and listened to his daughter breathe under her blanket. And he thought with the clear, flat clarity that had once been his professional operating mode about what, exactly, he had just driven himself into. A knock on the window. He turned. A man in a dark jacket was standing at the driver's side, one hand resting on the roof. He had the kind of face that was designed to be forgettable, medium, everything, symmetrical, no distinguishing marks. The face of someone whose job required not being remembered. He gestured for Daniel to lower the window. Daniel lowered it 2 inches. "Mr. Hayes," the man said. His voice was pleasant, conversational. "We're not interested in you. Hand the woman over and drive home. Take your daughter to bed." The use of his name landed in Daniel's chest like something cold. "I don't know who you're talking about," Daniel said. "Don't." The man's tone didn't change. "We ran your plates 90 seconds after she got in your car. We know who you are. We know where you live. We know your daughter goes to Westfield Elementary on Garner Street, and that her teacher's name is Mrs. Patterson." A brief pause, letting that land. "We're not here for complications." "Just her." From the back seat very quietly, Lily said, "Bo." The man heard it. He looked at the blanket-shaped form on the back seat. Daniel felt something happen in his chest, a specific, physical thing, like a temperature dropping. "Give me a minute to talk to her," Daniel said. The man considered. Nodded. Stepped back from the window. Daniel turned to Eva. "You heard all of that," he said. "Yes. They know my name. They know my address. They know my daughter's school. I know." Her voice was steady and terrible. "You should give me up. This isn't your problem. You picked up a stranger. You didn't sign up for this." Daniel looked at her for a long time. Then he looked at the blanket in the back seat. Then he started the engine. He drove the Honda straight at the gap between the second and third SUV, took it at a speed that should not have fit through the gap but did barely, the side mirror folding with a crack, and he was through, and he was accelerating, and behind him there was the sound of doors slamming and engines turning over, and he had, he estimated, about 45 seconds before they reorganized. He took 4 turns in under a minute, into the warren of loading docks and service roads that ran behind the warehouses. Roads that didn't appear on most maps because they hadn't been formally surveyed in 20 years. Roads he knew because he had spent 3 months, 7 years ago, learning the industrial geography of this city for reasons that had nothing to do with driving strangers across town. He cut the lights, navigated on memory and moonlight, pulled into the shadow of a loading dock deep inside the complex and stopped. Silence. He turned to Eva. "Talk," he said. "Fast." Everything. She talked. Her name was not Eva Carter. Or rather, it was the name she used now. The one on the documents she'd built over the past year, since leaving Meridian Capital Group's data analytics division. Her actual name was Harriet Sloan. She had spent 4 years at Meridian running predictive models for what she'd been told were routine investment portfolios. 11 months ago, she'd noticed an anomaly, a pattern in the outflow data small enough to be noise, regular enough to be a system, payments distributed across 47 domestic accounts, each below the reporting threshold, each time to avoid institutional flags. Aggregated, the pattern mapped onto a sum of approximately $340 million, moved in 18 months. She'd reported it to her supervisor. Her supervisor had gone quiet. 3 weeks later, she'd been offered a promotion to a role that would have moved her off the analytics floor entirely upward. Laterally, away from the data, she'd understood what that meant. She'd started quietly copying files. "I didn't take everything," she said. "I couldn't, but what's on that drive is enough to demonstrate the pattern, trace the entities, and connect 11 payments to 4 names that are not supposed to be in those records. One of them is a deputy undersecretary at the Treasury Department. One of them runs the risk compliance division at a major investment bank. Daniel absorbed this, and the team behind us," he said. "Corporate security? Technically." She said it with a flatness that made the qualifier do a lot of work. Meridian maintains a contract with a private security firm called Ashwood Solutions. On paper, they do executive protection and facility security. Off paper, she stopped. Off paper, they do this. From under the blanket, are they the bad guys? Both adults looked at the back seat. Lily had emerged. She was sitting up, blanket around her shoulders like a cape, rabbit in her lap, eyes perfectly clear. "Yes," Eva said. Lily considered this with the gravity of someone filing important information. "Okay," she said. "Lily," Daniel said, "I need you to stay down." "I know." She lay back down, but kept the blanket folded so she could see out. "Bo, there's a car in the corner." He checked. She was right. A vehicle stationary, lights off, was parked at the far edge of the loading dock, near the service gate. It hadn't been there when they'd pulled in, which meant it had arrived after them, without lights. They had been followed in the dark, or someone had been here already. "Seatbelt," Daniel said. He pulled out the opposite way. Through the service gate that was supposed to be locked but wasn't. The padlock was old and he'd known it would be. Had cataloged this gate years ago as a detail, a footnote, the kind of thing you notice when you're paid to notice things. He drove without speaking for 3 minutes. East, through the dead quiet streets of the industrial zone, then north, toward the part of the city where the residential blocks began, and there were enough parked cars that a single Honda could stop being a vehicle and start being furniture. He parked on a side street between 2 vans. Eva looked at him. "How did you know about the gate?" she said. "I used to know a lot of things about this city." "Used to?" "You're a ride-share driver who takes his 6-year-old daughter on night shifts." "Yes, and yet you just executed a moving traffic evasion, navigated a dark industrial zone from memory, and identified a tail that was operating without lights." She paused. "Who are you?" He was quiet for a moment. "Daniel Hayes," he said. "That part is true. But before the driving, I worked for a private security consultancy that contracted with federal agencies. Counterintelligence support, surveillance detection, mostly domestic, some international. I was on the technical side: systems, networks, coordination, not field operations. Not often. 3 times. Twice, domestically, once abroad." He didn't elaborate, and she didn't push. "I left when my wife was diagnosed. I was done before she died. But I finished out the transition, and then I stopped." "Why didn't you go back?" "After?" He looked at the rearview mirror. Lily was watching them both, not afraid, just very serious. In the way she got when she understood the conversation was important. "Because she's in this car," Daniel said. A silence settled over the three of them. "I can't undo having picked you up," Daniel said. "They have my name. They have my address. If I drop you at a corner and drive home and pretend this didn't happen, that doesn't actually make me safe. It makes me someone they've already cataloged and assessed and decided what to do with." "Correct. So the only useful direction is forward." "Correct. The data on that drive, if it got to the right people, the right journalists, the right investigators, these people lose their leverage, lose their operational cover. That's the theory. Then let's test it." He held out his hand. "Give me the drive." He had, in the back seat below Lily's flannel blanket, a go bag. It had been there for 2 years. He'd put it together in the 6 months after leaving his previous work. The way former practitioners of certain trades put together go bags, not out of paranoia exactly, but out of the understanding that the world you leave does not always fully let go of you. It contained a burner phone with a prepaid SIM, a compact battery pack, a folded thermal emergency blanket, $200 in cash, and a small encrypted thumb drive labeled Emergency Contact that contained 2 email addresses and a set of instructions he'd hoped never to use. He took the burner phone. He took the drive Eva had given him. He connected them. "What are you doing?" Eva asked. "The 2 addresses on this drive belong to a journalist at the National Investigative Press and a contact at the Treasury Inspector General's office. Both of them are people I was asked to surveil once, as part of a job I didn't finish when I understood who was ordering the surveillance and why." He looked at the drive. "I kept their contact information afterward. I didn't know why at the time. I told myself it was professional habit. And now, I'm going to send them everything on your drive, with a 12-page context document I'm going to type very quickly." Eva stared at him. "I type fast," he said. From the back seat, Lily said, "He does. He taught me the home row keys." He worked for 22 minutes. In those 22 minutes, 2 vehicles passed the street without slowing. 1 cat crossed in front of the Honda. Lily fell asleep again. Finally, genuinely, the deep, unbothered sleep of someone whose nervous system had decided that things were, for the moment, being handled. Eva sat beside him and said nothing. When he needed her to confirm a name, a date, a transaction reference, she confirmed it. When he needed her to spell a name, she spelled it. She was, he noticed, extremely precise. Her recall was exceptional. She had the habits of someone who spent years working with numbers that required exactness. At 1:14 a.m., he sent the first email. At 1:16, the second. Both included the files from Eva's drive, the context document, a brief explanatory note, and a request for an acknowledgement. Both emails were sent through a routing chain that would take them through 4 servers before delivery, a habit so old it was reflexive. He put the burner phone in his jacket pocket. "Now we wait," he said. "For how long? Until someone on the other end is awake and reads it. Hour, maybe 2. Then they start making calls. Once that machine is in motion, Ashwood Solutions becomes a liability problem instead of an asset. You think that's enough? I think it's the beginning of enough." He looked at her. "Do you have somewhere to go? Someone who can receive you quietly?" She thought for a moment. "My sister. She's in Vermont. We haven't spoken in 2 years. But call her on the burner. Now, before we move again, don't say where you are. Just tell her you're coming, and that you need a week with no questions." Eva took the phone. She dialed. The call lasted 4 minutes quiet, and then not quiet, and then quiet again, in the pattern of a conversation between people who have not spoken in a long time and are relearning how to. When she hung up, her eyes were wet. "She said yes," Eva said. "Of course she did," Daniel said. "She's your sister." At 1:51 a.m., while they were preparing to move again, Daniel had selected a route to a bus station 12 minutes north, from which Eva could reach the interstate. A text came back on the burner. Message received. Content reviewed. First call made 1:47 a.m. Can you confirm source is secure and cooperating? He typed back, yes. She's prepared to give a full recorded statement. The response came in under a minute. We're moving. Keep your head down. Daniel showed it to Eva. She read it twice. She pressed her lips together very tightly. She looked out the windshield at the empty street and took a slow breath. That's it, she said. The first domino, Daniel said. Not the last. He started the engine. They were 3 blocks from the bus station when the black Suburban came out of a side street and stopped broadside across the road. One man. The same man who had knocked on his window in the warehouse lot. The forgettable face. He was standing beside the SUV, hands at his sides. And he was alone. No backup visible. And his posture was different now. Not threatening. Something else. Daniel stopped the Honda. The man walked toward them. Daniel held his position. The man stopped at the passenger side. Eva flinched. He held up his phone. On the screen, a text thread. Daniel couldn't read it from the driver's seat, but Eva could. He watched her face as she read. Something in it changed. What does it say? Daniel asked. She exhaled. It says the principals have been notified. It says Ashwood's contract with Meridian has been suspended pending an internal review. It says she stopped, and when she continued, her voice was different, quieter. It says he's been instructed to stand down. The man outside nodded once. Then he walked back to his SUV, got in, and drove away. Daniel watched the taillights until they disappeared. That's not how these things usually end, Eva said. No, Daniel agreed. Usually it takes longer. Someone moved very fast. Yes, from the back seat, Lily said, eyes still closed. Are we done? Daniel looked in the rearview mirror. Almost, he said. At 3:40 a.m., he dropped Eva at the bus station. She stood outside the Honda for a moment, hand on the door, not quite closing it. In the flat light of the station forecourt, she looked tired and intact, and like someone who had recently been through something she would spend a long time processing. I don't have anything to give you, she said. I know. What you did tonight. You were in trouble, Daniel said. My daughter was in the car. Those things don't subtract from each other. Eva looked at Lily, asleep in the back seat, the rabbit still tucked under her arm. She's remarkable, Eva said. I know. She's going to be. Eva stopped. Seemed to decide something. She already is. Daniel nodded. Eva closed the door and walked into the station. He waited until she was through the inner doors before he pulled away. 3 days later, a car he didn't recognize was parked in front of his building when he came home from the morning school run. It was a gray sedan, government spec, not civilian. The kind with a small antenna array on the roof that wasn't standard equipment. A woman got out. Early 50s, white, silver hair cut close. She wore the kind of clothes that were expensive in ways that were not immediately obvious, and she moved with the deliberate composure of someone who had learned the hard way that how you walked into a room determined how the room received you. She held up a credential. He didn't need to read it carefully to understand what agency it belonged to. Mr. Hayes, she said. I'm Deputy Director Carolyn Weir. I'd appreciate 10 minutes. He looked at her. He looked at the car. He looked at the building, where Lily was inside finishing her breakfast and watching cartoons. 10 minutes, he said. They stood on the sidewalk. She did not offer him a cup of coffee or any of the social lubricants that these conversations sometimes came with. He appreciated that. She told him. The emails he'd sent had reached 2 recipients who were already, separately, building cases around Meridian Capital Group's offshore network. His package had connected 2 data sets that had not previously been linked. The resulting combined file had been sufficient to obtain emergency warrants within 18 hours. 4 arrests had been made. One of the names was the Deputy Undersecretary Eva had mentioned. The internal review at Ashwood Solutions had already produced 2 cooperative witnesses. You were thorough, the Deputy Director said. I was taught to be, Daniel said. She looked at him. She had the eyes of someone who evaluated people for a living, and had long since stopped finding it interesting. "We could use thorough," she said. "No. The role would be remote-based, analytical only, no field requirements. No. Your compensation would be deputy director." He kept his voice level. "I have a 6-year-old daughter who starts first grade in September. I drive nights and I'm home in the morning and I take her to school and I pick her up and I know the name of every kid in her class and I help her read before bed. That is the job I have. That is the job I'm keeping." A beat. She nodded. Not with disappointment, with something more, like recognition. "If you change your mind," she said. "I won't," Daniel said. "But thank you for asking, instead of assuming." That seemed to surprise her slightly. She got back in the gray sedan and it drove away. Daniel stood on the sidewalk for a moment, in the ordinary morning light of an ordinary residential street, and felt the specific, quiet relief of a decision he didn't have to reconsider. Then he went inside to make sure Lily hadn't eaten all the toast. 2 weeks passed. Then one morning, when Daniel came down to the Honda in the building's small parking lot, he found a package on the front seat. Not threatening. Not that kind of package. It was a small wooden box, about the size of a hardcover novel, with a handwritten note taped to the top. The handwriting was careful and small. The kind of handwriting produced by someone trained in precision. "For Lily, I didn't have your address, but I remembered your building from that night. I hope this is okay. H.S." Inside the box, a children's book, hardcover, with a navy blue cover and gold lettering. "The Night Watch. Stories of Quiet Bravery." And beneath it, wrapped in tissue paper, a small compass, brass, old, functional, the needle trembling faintly in the cool morning air as he held it. He stood in the parking lot for a moment. Then he took both items upstairs. Lily was at the kitchen table eating cereal, with more milk than was strictly necessary, which was how she always ate cereal. She looked up when he came in. "What's that?" "Something for you." He set the book and the compass on the table. She examined the compass first, turning it over in her hands, watching the needle find north with a focus that he recognized as the early stage of an obsession. Who sent it? The woman from the car. The one with the torn coat. Lily considered this. Eva. Her real name is Harriet. Lily considered this too, recalibrating. "Harriet," she said. "That's an old-fashioned name." "It is. I like it." She set the compass down and opened the book. She read the first page silently. She'd been doing that for 3 months now, reading silently instead of aloud, which filled him with a complicated joy. Then she looked up. "Beau, yeah. Do you wish you hadn't stopped? That night?" He sat down across from her. Outside the kitchen window, the city was fully awake, doing its loud, ordinary things, buses and people and pigeons, and the specific rattle of a loose grate on the street below that the city had been promising to fix for 18 months. "No," he said, "even though it was dangerous, even though, because it was the right thing." He thought about this carefully, the way he thought about things Lily asked that deserved a careful answer. "Because some things need you to decide who you are," he said. "Not who you used to be, and not who you're afraid of becoming. Just who you are, when it actually matters." She looked at him with those eyes that had always seemed, to him, to be measuring something he couldn't quite see. "You stopped," she said. "I stopped. So you know, I know what I chose." He stood, because the moment was long enough and she needed to finish her cereal before the bus came. "That's enough." She turned back to the book. He poured the rest of the coffee. That night, his first fare came in at 11:22 p.m. He accepted it without thinking. He checked the rearview mirror. Lily was at Mrs. Calloway's tonight, her idea, because Jade from down the hall was sleeping over and they were going to stay up late and eat popcorn and watch something with talking animals. He had kissed her on the forehead and told her he'd see her in the morning. The car was quiet without her. He reached back out of habit toward the headrest and felt the folded flannel blanket still there. He left it even when she wasn't with him, and for a second his hand just rested on it. Then he pulled back onto the road. He drove through the city the way he always drove it, noting the lights, reading the traffic, watching the mirrors with the mild professional attention of someone who had learned, long ago, that the important things are rarely announced. A car behind him changed lanes. Another held its distance. A bus pulled out from a stop, and the cars behind it fanned around it like water around a stone. He watched all of it. Not with fear, not with the specific tension that had lived in his chest for the 2 weeks after the events on Route 9, which had gradually loosened and quieted as the news cycle moved and the warrants were executed. And Ashwood Solutions principals found themselves fielding calls from attorneys rather than issuing orders to contractors. Just with attention, the quiet, steady attention of someone who has decided, once and clearly, who he is. The address came up on his map. He turned. The streets were wet from earlier rain, and the lights were doing what lights do on wet asphalt at midnight, fragmenting, spreading, turning the ordinary surface of things into something briefly beautiful. He drove toward it. The city moved around him the way it always moved, indifferent and enormous, full of people at the end of their days or the middle of their nights, each one a story he'd probably never know. He'd picked up hundreds of them, thousands, had driven them home or to work or to the airport or to addresses that felt, from the way they'd given them, like destinations they were uncertain about. Most nights, nothing happened. Some nights, a woman was standing in the road. He turned onto the pickup street and slowed. He checked the mirror one more time. Empty road. Clear sky. The small amber glow of the city reflected back off the low clouds, the way it always was, the way it had been since before he'd come to this city, would be long after. He pulled up to the address. Waited. The fare got in a man this time, older, tired, carrying a bag that suggested a late shift ending somewhere. "Thanks for coming," the man said. "Sure," Daniel said. He pulled away from the curb. The night opened up ahead of him, and he drove into it the way he always did, unhurried, watchful, and entirely, exactly himself.